Ok, raz, dwa, trzy, raz, dwa, trzy. Sprawdźmy, czy wszystko dobrze słychać, czy wszystko dobrze widać. Napiszcie nam na czacie i już za chwilkę będziemy startować z naszym meetupem. Ok, jeszcze zanim mi odpowiecie, to serdecznie zachęcam Was do udostępniania naszej transmisji na Waszych profilach na Facebooku, na różnego rodzaju grupach. Ewentualnie możecie rzucić link na jakiś firmowy Slack, czy jakieś inne miejsce, gdzie ludzie, którzy mają podobną pasję jak my, mogą czegoś nowego dowiedzieć się, a dzisiaj bardzo topowy, bardzo trendy temat, mianowicie związany z Micro-Frontends. Ok, dobra, piszą, że wszystko jest ok. Dobra, w takim razie daję Wam na początku dżingiel i startujemy. Ok, sprawdźmy, czy z moją prezentacją jest wszystko ok. Widzę, że tak. Ok, siema, witam Was serdecznie na kolejnej już 10. edycji dev.js Online. Jak widzicie, od marca sporo wypuściliśmy tych wydarzeń w formie internetowej z uwagi na to, że nasze wydarzenia standardowe, czyli meetupy stacjonarne, nie mogą się odbywać ze względu na tego całego koronawirusa. No natomiast mam nadzieję, że już niebawem wrócimy i będą mogły odbywać się meetupy stacjonarne, a do tego czasu mamy dość gęsto wypełnioną dla Was agendę na meetupy na meetupy online. O, Joe pisze, że piękny i młody jak zawsze. Oczywiście, nie wiem, czy to było o mnie, czy o prelegencie. W obu przypadkach potwierdzam, oczywiście z przymrużeniem oka. W takim razie możemy zaczynać. Dla osób, które mnie nie znają jeszcze, być może są takie osoby, nazywam się Paweł Niewęgłowski i jestem liderem społeczności dev.js. Jeżeli ktoś z Was chciałby się ze mną skontaktować, to serdecznie do tego zachęcam. Może to zrobić pod mailem współpraca@dev.js.org. Możecie do mnie pisać we wszelkich sprawach związanych z naszą organizacją, z naszymi inicjatywami lub ewentualnie z propozycjami, co możemy wspólnie zrobić, bo tych możliwości jest bardzo dużo i już niebawem, pewnie w przyszłym tygodniu, przygotuję dla Was taki specjalny mailing, w którym dokładnie opiszemy, w jaki sposób każdy z Was może się zaangażować w naszą społeczność i poświęcając minimalną liczbę czasu pomóc nam w całej organizacji tego przedsięwzięcia. Szczerze powiedziawszy, że nam dev.js zajmuje coraz więcej czasu. Jeszcze jak teraz doszły te nowe inicjatywy, jak podcast, jak szkolenia, jak niebawem dojdą bardzo fajne wywiady live, także również jest tego bardzo dużo i mam nadzieję, że będzie tego coraz więcej. Także jeżeli ktoś z Was chciałby poświęcić jakiś czas ze swojego tygodnia, aby nam pomóc w realizacji misji dev.jsa, to serdecznie do tego zachęcam. Tutaj Mateusz pisze, żeby zostawić meetupy online. Na razie meetupy online na pewno będą, natomiast jak to będzie wyglądało później, jeżeli się pewnie będzie dało, to będziemy się starali również transmitować meetupy stacjonarne, ale no tego w tej chwili obiecać nie możemy. Więc tak, jako dev.js jesteśmy ogólnopolską społecznością pasjonatów frontendu, zrzeszamy programistów i programistki. No i tutaj mamy całe spektrum technologii webowych, nie jesteśmy ani za Angularem, ani za Vue, ani za Reactem. No i cóż, chcemy stworzyć dla Was platformę, która umożliwi Wam rozwijanie się, no i też poznawanie innych osób o podobnej pasji. Więc tak, może pokażę Wam jeszcze, zanim przejdziemy do prezentacji Filipę, że w jaki sposób wyglądają nasze meetupy stacjonarne. Tutaj akurat macie zdjęcie z kampusu Google'a, gdzie nasz meetup odbywał się w Warszawie. Tutaj też macie kolejne zdjęcie. Tutaj natomiast macie zdjęcie z Lublina, z pubu Uszewca. Tutaj kolejne zdjęcie. Tutaj natomiast Hewre w Krakowie. Tutaj akurat to lokalizacja, gdzie przychodzi najwięcej osób, bo 250 osób przychodzi właśnie w Krakowie na dev.jsa, także no my już się nie możemy doczekać, aby wrócić, no ale cóż, wiadomo jak jest i te obostrzenia nas trochę hamują, no ale mam nadzieję, że to niebawem wszystko minie. Tutaj jeszcze kolejne zdjęcia. Więc tak, do dnia dzisiejszego w sumie na wydarzenia dev.js zarejestrowało się 21 450 osób i ta liczba nowych osób ciągle rośnie. Widzę, że coraz to nowi deweloperzy dowiadują się o naszej społeczności. Też z uwagi na tą, można powiedzieć, tematykę coraz ciekawszą, no i też pewnie ze względu na eventy live w formie online, z uwagi na to, że w tej chwili już nasze wydarzenia nie odbywają się tylko w kilku miastach, to tak naprawdę w tej chwili możemy docierać do ludzi z całej Polski. Oczywiście nasze meetupy można oglądać zarówno w formie live, a jak później również można znaleźć je na fanpage'u w zakładce wideo oraz można je również znaleźć, nawet tą transmisję i to jest tylko taki, można powiedzieć, informacja dla osób, które są tutaj, również na moim kanale na YouTubie Dev Radio Paweł Niewęgowski sobie wpiszecie, tam również od dzisiaj będą dostępne transmisje z dev.jsa, także jeżeli ktoś z Was chciałby sobie oglądać nasze eventy nie na Facebooku, a na przykład na YouTubie, wtedy zachęcam, aby tam się udać, Dev Radio i tam możecie sobie również oglądać nasze transmisje. Mamy oczywiście social media, mamy oczywiście Facebooka, na którym teraz oczywiście jesteśmy i przez którego dla Was transmitujemy eventy. Naszym sponsorem dzisiaj głównym jest firma SoftServe. Pewnie większość z Was zna tą firmę, jeżeli ktoś nie zna, a być może będzie poszukiwał w bliskiej przyszłości nowego miejsca, w którym będzie się mógł odnaleźć przy ambitnych projektach, to serdecznie zapraszam, sprawdźcie co oni oferują. Wydaje mi się, że nie trzeba tutaj przekonywać, ale sobie zobaczcie, czym oni się dokładnie zajmują i w jaki sposób Wy możecie nawiązać z nimi współpracę. Dzisiaj szczególny prelegent, bo z Brazylii. I nigdy jeszcze nie mieliśmy prelegenta, że tak powiem, z Brazylii. Nie wiem jak Wy, ale ja do tej pory kojarzyłem z Brazylii Ronaldo, Adriano. No a teraz od dzisiaj już będziecie również kojarzyli Filipę. Filipa jest bardzo fajny, bardzo sympatyczny, bardzo otwarty na Wasze pytania. I tutaj uwaga, przez cały czas trwania dzisiejszego meetupu można zadawać Filipie pytania w języku angielskim. Na naszym fanpage'u dev.js pojawił się specjalny post z taką oto kwadratową grafiką Questions for the speaker i pod nim możecie zostawiać pytania w języku angielskim do Filipy. I dzisiaj kolejna gratka na zakończenie. Dzisiaj po prezentacji Filipy, sekcję Q&A nie będę prowadził ja, tylko będzie prowadził pewnie jeden z najpopularniejszych deweloperów frontendowych w Polsce, Mateusz Grzesiukiewicz, też autor bardzo poczytnej książki międzynarodowej. Wydaje mi się, że dużo pewnie z Was osób ją ma lub jeżeli nie, to warto sobie wpisać Mateusz Grzesiukiewicz i odnaleźć sobie tą świetną książkę. Zapewne interesują Was, kiedy będą kolejne eventy online. Tutaj Joe pisze i gorące Brazylijki. No tak, no masz rację, karnawał Rio de Janeiro na pewno warto odwiedzić. Natomiast tak, kolejny nasz meetup odbędzie się jeszcze we wrześniu. 23 września planujemy meetup z Bartoszem Szczecińskim. On opowie Wam o drodze do clouda. Wydaje mi się, że to będzie bardzo fajna sesja dla osób, które już się sporo w JS orientują, które naprawdę chcą poszerzyć swoje horyzonty, które chcą się czegoś nowego dowiedzieć. Oczywiście wstęp jest bezpłatny, trzeba się tylko zarejestrować. Link jest na naszym meetupie, ewentualnie też zaraz Wam gdzieś tutaj w komentarzu wrzucę informację o linku, abyście się już mogli rejestrować. No i też wtedy otrzymać pusha o tym, kiedy, że tak powiem, ten mail będzie, no i też później przypomnienie mailowe. Ok, i to już jest właściwie koniec tej mojej prezentacji wstępu. Widzę, że Filipa is ready. Ok.
Hello guys.
Okay, Filipa. Okay. Thank you and okay, I have a technical problem. No, okay. Go, Felipe.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, let me share my screen first. Okay, yeah, I hope you see that. Yeah, I can see it that you see. So let's start with the presentation right here. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here to be able to talk to you about tech, about things that I love and things that I'm sure that you love. So for those who don't know, I am Felipe. I'm a Brazilian software engineer. I've been working with JavaScript for I guess the best part of 8 years right now. I've done everything that I could to learn more about JavaScript, to get better acquainted with this universe that this programming language is. So I've done a lot of stuff in the browser, in the server, and yeah. So recently, I got involved with this topic of micro-frontends, and yeah, that's the reason for this talk. I just want to share a new way on how you can do that. How can you achieve this micro front-end architecture with minimum overhead, minimum complexity, and maximum performance and maximum happiness across your teams. So yeah, I'm here to talk about Module Federation, which is a tool, more than a tool. It's a concept, but it's also a tool developed by Webpack, and it was developed, to be honest, outside of Webpack, and then it was migrated into it, and it's coming out and on the new version of Webpack, which is Webpack 5. But it's already available there. Anyone could use. It's not going to be put out, so it's the beta version. So just let me share real quick here. That's the Webpack. That's the Webpack website, and here you have a session called Module Federation under Concepts, and yeah, that's where you can find information about the Module Federation plugin, which is something that we're going to be talking about today, which is this one, Module Federation plugin. Yeah, so that's pretty exciting. Yeah, but a while ago, I learned that when you talk about stuff, you need to start with why. So why Module Federation and why this plugin? But I want to go a step back and think about why front-ends, micro front-ends in the first place, right? Why not just regular front-ends? And that's a new topic. And this talk is not about micro front-ends in general. It's not about having an overview of this architectural style, but it's about a tool. But to understand the tool, we need to understand the concept first and the need for it in the first place. So why micro frontends? And when I was thinking about this and how to answer this question, I thought that on my perception, the biggest argument for a micro frontend architecture is that cross-team deployments is hard. I think that's at the heart of the issue. When you have, I know it's a nice new concept that it's cool to play with, but on my perception, if you have a single team working on a single product, I think you are much better off without micro frontends. I think you should stick with a framework or something to do the job and to deliver value to your product, and not think about complex architectures and complex scalability. So, but it may come to a point where your product grows and or you change products and you start working for a new company, or start working on a new product inside of your company, and now there's multiple teams and a single product. Then at first it can be exciting like this. That's just a little bit of a timeline of how frustrating things can get. Like at first there's all those agile concepts of how to release stuff to production cross team. So agile release train, and you have concepts like constant delivery and constant deployment, and yeah, continuous deployment, sorry. And it can be exciting at first, but then there's, as everything in agile, there's roles, you know, like and not all roles on agile are fun. Like release management is, at least in my view, is not. I don't like to be release manager, and I don't like to for a good developer that could be delivering value to the product to be stuck doing release management, which is getting stuff from across all teams, making it work on a staging environment, and then deploying it to production. And this activity could be very consuming, very time consuming, and very demanding for the person. And then there's like hot fixes and fast lane tickets, and things can get sorry, things can get urgent. Things can get like there's a bug that's more important than other bugs, and then it's a hot fix, and it becomes a fast lane, and it gets special attention, and everything is frozen until this gets to product. So yeah, it does happen, and it does happen a lot. So and then this becomes the keyword ASAP, which means as soon as possible. So everything needs to be done as soon as possible. So then you have also cherry picking and rebasing. You need to get stuff from a branch and get this across to a release branch or to a hotfix branch and get it to staging, and then freezing the staging, because only this hotfix needs to be there. So it can get confusing, it can get hard, and really hard, and with a lot of pressure. And then like eventually there's always the need for rolling back something, like, oh, this bug, it's not priority anymore, and like roll it back and unfreeze release, unfreeze a staging environment. And yeah, and then there's frustration, because you know that I've heard this, and I never forgot that the hardest thing when you try to scale your product, the hardest thing is not to scale infrastructure, is to scale people, is to scale teams. So because frustration is very bad. So you want to avoid your teams and your developers to get frustrated, and this kind of environment is not very good for that. Yeah, then enter micro-frontends, because before that we were trying to get all the work done across all teams, bundle it together in a single release branch, and then put it on staging environments, and then releasing it to production through the work of a single person, which is the release manager. But it happens often, it happens every day, ideally, with continuous deployment, you know. So now we have different pieces. Like that's just a little bit of a visualization of what micro frontends are. So you have a team responsible for this bit, and a team responsible for this bit, and for this one, and everything gets deployed, everything gets here independently. And then we have an application which is a kind of a shell or a container that bundles it all together and make it happen. So that's the browser. It comes from, you know, the concept of microservices, but in a micro frontend there's a difference, which is the user, the customer, someone who's buying on the website, gets to see the result of your delivery. In a microservice, you know, someone's gonna notice if something goes wrong, but then in a micro frontend, if something goes wrong, if one of those does not integrate well with the rest, the user sees it, and it's often not a very good experience for them. So that's a micro frontend. That's like a rough sketch. But some pros of the micro frontend, sorry, architecture, incremental upgrades. So yeah, you can work on this and really use this concept of continuous delivery, and deliver value each day, and increment it and upgrade it. So your micro frontend, a little piece of your website, will be always, ideally always, on the latest version with the latest features. So that's pretty cool. And then we have also simple and decoupled code bases, which is very important as well. Have you ever tried to define coding style, linting rules, what else? Coding conventions, you know, tooling, which linter to use, which framework to use, define all of that across 30 developers. It's almost impossible, you know, to do it fast and to do it right. And it's much easier if you have to define it only on the domain of your micro frontend, and that's a single application owned by a single team. Ideally, all of them will be matched in a single team. So that's pretty good. And independent deployments, yeah, that's what I was talking about. You can deploy your micro frontend and go home and flip burgers and drink beer, and you're happy because you don't need to integrate it beforehand and to create a huge, massive deployment, because you can do your own deployment and make it work. So, and also autonomous teams. You know, teams are autonomous to choose frameworks and tools and everything. So ideally, yeah, they should be autonomous with minimum communication between teams. Of course, everything works better on paper, right? Because on a day-to-day basis, it has to have communication between teams and communication between micro frontends, but we're going to talk about it later. So how to implement it? Because the big problem is not how to develop a micro frontend. We all know how to do that, you know, but how to put them on the page, how to actually make them a website, right, or a product. So yeah, how to implement it? There's a lot of standards, which means that there's no standard at all, right? That's actually one of the cons. When someone talk about pros and cons of micro frontends, often shows up that there's no pattern, there's no single way to do it. with like there's no Redux for micro-frontends. You know, there's no single standard way. So, but there's a lot of ways you can do what I call a build time integration. I learned this somewhere, but it's a good name, where you will communicate between components like libraries, and they will get stuff from each other, and then you will have this container library that actually this container app, which will build and get stuff from those three and build a single application with stuff independently deployed to those three. But the problem here is quite obvious, that you still have to deploy this guy right here. So there's still coordination. It's less than before, but still. Then you could have, instead of a build time integration, you could have a runtime integration, you know, when the website kicks in and spins up. So you could use iframes to contain each framework. So, each micro frontend. So you could have a boilerplate like this that I copied from somewhere. You can have something like this to orchestrate your micro frontends and put them on iframes. Iframes are actually good because they provide good encapsulation, and you don't pollute the global scope. But they are also not good because they it's harder to communicate with each other, and it's harder to make them look nice. You know, they can be a problem with responsiveness. So there you go. And yeah, Spotify used to use this. Like each part of Spotify used to be something like this. But then you can also have a JavaScript integration, which is pretty much like this one, but with JavaScript being loaded and then routed. Like you have routes here, and then each one of them will load a specific application, which is a micro frontend. But still, you have problems with this. Problems like this bundle. It's depending on the bundler that you're using, especially with Webpack, and I don't know if the others are different or not, but you can't read stuff from this bundle on this one and the other way around. You can't communicate between bundles. They're a closed black box that you cannot understand from outside. And also, you cannot read a chunk. You know, the concept of chunks, like Webpack has the split chunks plugin, for example, that generates chunks for things to being loaded async. So they can be loaded only on demand. So those chunks generated by this bundle cannot be read by this one. So again, there's problems of communication. They actually can, but it's far from ideal. Usually it involves duplication and bad things happening. So, and also there's the problem of multiple React instances, or your framework of choice, multiple instances on the page, you know, because if you bundle this with React, there's a React bundled here. And if you bundle this with React, there's a React bundle here as well. So you have the weight of two Reacts on the page. We solved this in the team that I work. We solved this by creating a window reference with a React version there, a React instance attached to the window object. And then those bundles, they don't have React. they read from this external one. So that's a way you can go around it, but it doesn't feel native. You know, it feels like a hack, which is a good hack, but regardless. And then enter Webpack Module Federation, which is a new tool. As I said, it's beta still, but it's a pretty good one, and I'm pretty sure it's here to stay, and it's here to become a standard. So I hope you know something about Module Federation. Something about Webpack, because yeah, you know that Webpack has a config object with a plugins array. So here you can use this plugin called Module Federation plugin. Okay, what it does, and what we're doing here is actually trying to make this, remember, this happen. So each one of those is going to be injected here, and this one is going to receive those. So that's the dynamic. So the one that injects into another is called a remote. Sorry, it's called a remote. And then I imagine here like a style guide app, like just a components library, and it's injecting components to other applications. And then you just name it first. You can forget this library because it's not needed anymore. That's a downside. It's beta. I'm gonna talk about it later. But the name, you have to name it, and then you have to give it a file name, which is this remote entry. This file is gonna be the gateway between two bundles. You know, for one bundle to read from another, you have to give it a file name, which will be kind of a map between them. So sorry about that. Just let me see if there's no messages here. No messages, perfect. So yeah, because you know, you can start talking and then you can lose some time if something goes wrong, but I'm glad it's going fine. So yeah, it exposes. Then there's this property called exposes, and here you can just name your things that you're exposing. It could be React components, functions, whatever. It's going to be imported on the host. It's going to be imported by this name, like button. Okay. And then shared. That's so nice. That's pretty good. Shared means that all those libraries are going to be shared between federated applications. So what it means is that once you add, let's say React and React DOM here, and you could add any library here, like styled components, moment, whatever. Webpack is going to create a chunk out of that, a chunk for React, a chunk for React DOM, and then all when those applications connect with each other, they're not going to read React from the bundle because it's not going to be there. It's going to be on a chunk, and then they are going to use React from this chunk and not from the bundle itself. So it saves a lot of space if you use this shared, because it's not going to duplicate stuff. So that's the remote, and then the host, you just have to name it, and then you have to set the remotes property, which is this name, the remotes that you're going to use. And then you also set the share. But this name is not going to work by itself, right? It has to have somewhere in your template, if you're using React or whatever, you have to have an HTML document, because that's how the internet works. So in your document, in your template, you have to include this. So that's a reference to this remote entry and to all remote entries that you want to eventually use. And by this reference, you can use this, and you can now use stuff exported here in here. So I have a live demo so we can see it in practice. But last thing is this. There's a new syntax, so you could make it even easier. You don't need to create the HTML file. You just use this syntax style guide at HTTPS, whatever it is, and then Webpack is gonna, through Webpack HTML plugin, it's gonna inject it into the page. So that's coming handy. So just a few concepts real quick, so we can move on from, that's not general concepts, though you could hear them here and there, but they are module federation concepts. So first, the host, which is the one that receives components, right? So they are receiving stuff. And then the remote, which is the one that injects components into a host, right? So I'm talking about components, but they could be pages, they could be functions, they could be anything. So that's, you got to think of a remote as a micro frontend. So the remote is the micro frontend that's going to be injected. So a team is responsible for this remote, another team for this remote, another team, and that's it. And then there's the bidirectional hosts. Okay, not all remotes have to be unidirectional. Some of them can be even bidirectional, because, you know, let's say you have an application here that exposes a header that's being used on another one, but then it gets a widget to be used here. So they are exchanging, they are hosts and remotes at the same time. So that's a bidirectional host. Okay, application patterns. So real quick, types of applications that we can build with that, and that's for micro frontends in general. So here we can build a design system or a component library or a style guide, which is you guys may know, like Storybook or tools like this, which like concentrate all the components that your company are using and then put them somewhere. So that's a way, because that's a single remote and those are hosts, and they are getting components, which you can call this a micro frontend that's exporting stuff to different pages. So yeah, that's a design system, and you can do that with Module Federation. There's also multi-SPA module sharing. That's a big name, but what it means is that you can have different websites that consume components from each other, and they are all bidirectional hosts, you know? So let's say you have a newsfeed that exports a header, but you have an admin page that exports a footer, and others are using that. And then let's say you have an analytics page that's exporting something and it's being used. So that's it. And last but not least, you have the maybe most common use case for a micro frontend, which is a shell-driven application. You have a shell, which is a host, and then you have n number of remotes that are the micro-frontends per se. So then your host will have a routing system like React Router or whatever. And then from here, it's going to render the correct micro-frontend. So that's going to be injected as, exposed as a page, and it's going to be imported as a page, and it's going to be rendered. Then if the user changes page, it's going to be, the correct one's going to be rendered here. So that's a shell-driven application. The shell is responsible for understanding the user and who the user is, what the user wants, and for example, it's responsible for authentication and all this that needs to be done out of the micro-frontend universe and just injected into it. So it can be a good source of information to the micro-frontend. And then, yeah, when you navigate, it just gets the correct information and renders the appropriate micro-frontend. So real quick, live example. So yeah, I prepared just a little thing here. You can see that that's not a mono repo. Those are different repositories, and I tried to simulate here a kind of a social media. So you have a shell, which is the container, and you have a login page and a user page. Okay, and those are different applications, and you can see that the login page is using Svelte, which is pretty cool because it's a different framework, and the shell is React and the user is React. So let's build it and see what happens. So yarn build and yarn serve. Let's see, yarn build, yarn serve, yarn build. I'm building them. I could run them as dev server, but just building them. And here it is. That's let's say our federated application, which is pretty cool, right? Because we have this sidebar, which is React, and we have this header, which is React. But then we have this, which is Svelte, you know? And let's look at it. There's no shadow DOM. There's no obscurity, you know? It's all here. You have like, that's React, 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 and then Svelte, you know? And it's pretty seamless. And just let me show you here. If I try to, just to see, so you see that it's actually working. If I try to do something like this, it's not going to log in. But then if I go like this username that I gave myself, it's logging in, and that's my name over here, everything, user page, React, that's React, that's, and a single micro frontend, that's another React application over here, a shell. And then if I log out and go here and use another one, it's another application, another user. So you can see that it works, right? So let me show you how it works. The login page is the cool part. So if you go here, you will see that that's a Svelte component. You know, that's a very cool framework that I like.
Felipe, please use Zoom on font.
Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry about that. Okay. Is this better?
Yes.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Now that's a Svelte component, you know. Here you have the markup. It's a regular form with regular validation. That's CSS. But then there's the JavaScript part. And this part does, what this part does is, first, it handles submit. So whenever it's submitted, it goes to my JSON file here. You know, that's JSON with users, and gets the user. This would be your regular await, fetch, you know, users from whatever is your API. So then I'm getting the user with the correct username, the correct password. If there's no user, I validate. If there is a user, I dispatch any event. That's native event handling from JavaScript. So what event am I dispatching? I'm dispatching this custom event that I created called login, and then I send a method that access the user object, the logged one. You know, so here it just gets the user and fires an event that lets you get the logged user, and that's what it does. You know, that's an abstraction of a real case scenario, but then you could have a team working only with login and authentication. And then let's see how the shell deals with that. And here in the shell, I have, I have a page, which is the Svelte page, which is the login page. And then it subscribes to an event. It adds an event listener. And from here, whenever the logging event, remember from here, yeah, logging event is fired, it gets the response, gets the user, and sets the user into the context that I created here for this application, and then pushes it from to the user page. And the user page, again, is the last one. The user page is another React application, a different one, and it has the user card, which receives data and renders the user. So that's what is happening here. I just fire an event whenever I click here, and it's being captured by this React application. So what it means is that I can get my terminals here, and I could open, let's say, is it the login page? Yeah. And I have a login page working as a standalone. You could plug this into anything because it only validates if the user is logged in and fires an event, which is pretty cool because you can plug this literally anywhere. Of course, you need to want to be authenticated in my application because it's specific. But yeah, you could plug this anywhere. I plugged it here, and that's how this application is working. So just let's peek into how it's done here. We have the Webpack config, you know, and here we have plugins, as I said. And the plugin here is this. I give it a name. I give it a file name, which is the remote entry file. It's being read by the host, the shell. And then I expose load app, which is an initializer for Svelte apps. I just export this, which is here on my application, and that's it. I share nothing, and that's it. It's literally just it. And then on the user, I do kind of the same thing. I give it a name, give it a remote entry. I expose the user card, which is a component here on the side, and I share React and React DOM. That's nice. And then on the shell, what I do is set my remotes as login and user and say where they are and say that I want to get them. How do I include it on the application then? I just go here's Svelte page and I import load app from login load app. It's being made possible by Webpack. And also here, user card, it's user from user card. It's magic from Webpack. Because of the naming here, I can use this as a route there, as it would be an npm package. Okay, so that's it for the local part. I wanted to show you how it can be deployed, and it's kind of obvious if you got the logic, but right here, they are all hosted on GitHub, and I have a different repo for all of them. If you want to look at it, clone it, start it, like just go to my GitHub and it's going to be there. And the shell, I created a GitHub pages for it, GitHub pages. So if I go here, it's deployed 2 days ago. And if I go view deployment, it's there. So it's working as it should, but you can call it production, like same validation, the same functionality that you would expect, but on this environment. So just let me show you here something. If I go here, okay, I'm going faster because I'm running out of time, but if you go here, you will see remote entries. This one is from the login and this one is from the user. And I want to zoom in here. Yeah, remote entry. This one is from login, this one is from user. And what it does, what this file does is allow me to add, you understand, right? Allow me as host, because I'm host here, allow me to read those chunks. Like, can you see this chunk is coming from Module Federation login, and it's a chunk. It's unreadable by everyone else, but it's not unreadable for this application here because it has its secrets here on the remote entry. So this file, which is being created here, remote entry, is the key for understanding what's being generated by the bundle of this Svelte application. So just the last thing for those examples, if eventually you will not want this guy to have the latest version, because let's do something nice here. You can see login. Okay, you can see it's a standalone page, just like this one, and it can be accessed, it can be used. But let's say my team deploys something here that's urgent, because this is being used by different applications. It's being used by the admin, it's being used by the analytics, being used by elsewhere. So it needs this fix and it's being deployed, but it's going to break this one. So how do I deal with that? How do I deal with different versions of the same micro-frontend? And that's pretty easy. It's not related to Module Federation at all. You just need a strategy, like here, let's say the login. Let's go with it. Okay, that's the login Webpack config. Okay, that's the login application. What I'm gonna do is close this. It's not here. I'm going to go to the shell, okay? Because shell is the one who's consuming everything. It's consuming the login, it's consuming the user, it's the host of all the micro frontends. I go here, and what I do is put my remote entry from the login behind a version control. So I can do this. Now, every time, of course, I would need to do it like this, login version, okay? And now we can do it, and now like this. Okay, so login version is, I don't know, a GitHub variable. It's a CI variable. It's something that you can control and say, every time that the shell deploys, it's going to get a specific version of the login page and a specific version of the user page. Then this application, the login application, can update however it wants, how many versions it wants, but the shell will be safe because the shell is always getting versioned version of the login page. So that's a strategy that you can apply to fix this. And now going to the end of our presentation, it's not a silver bullet. It's not perfect, you know. There's no perfect tech. There's no perfect tool. So I just outlined a few drawbacks that I can see on this Module Federation plugin, okay? First is bundler specific. It's a Webpack thing. If you like to use rollup or I don't know, all the other bundlers that are available, like you need to wait until they develop something like this. But yeah, that's a drawback. It's bundler specific. There's no parcel version of it. There's no rollup version of it. There's no browserify or whatever. So the second one, it does a lot of magic, and that's true. There's a lot of magic going on. When I was debugging something using Module Federation a few days ago, I ran into a chunk bug that was scary as hell. I was doing something stupid, but you know, when something does a lot of magic, it can become dark magic, and it can bite you in the back. You know, so we need to be aware of things that do a lot of things in a very obscure way, and this does. You know, chunks are unreadable and bundles are unreadable, but we use them anyway. We already use them, so I don't see how Module Federation would make it worse. But it's a lot of magic going on, so should be aware of it. It's beta, yeah. It didn't go to to like production yet. It's not a stable version, but it's pretty close. It's version 29, RFC 29 of Webpack 5.0. So it's pretty close to be finally stable. Yeah, shared modules can behave unexpectedly. You know, the share modules that I spoke about, those, like, I try to work with styled components here, and they had a little bug, very, very subtle. And those are the bugs that I hate. I like the bugs that blow everything and that you can see something is going wrong. The subtle bugs, I think they're dangerous. So we need to be aware of this. Like, two applications using styled components at the same time in the same place, there was a little bit of a clash with class names. So yeah, we should be aware of that. And maybe I did something wrong. That's very possible because I'm not very smart. So, but yeah, we should be aware of this. And last, it can be challenging to implement on legacy apps. And that's my big frustration, that we had a big product. I work on a team that at SoftServe that develops for a client which with a huge retail business, and it's already everything there online working, and it's using Webpack 4. And after a week or so, I couldn't manage to upgrade it to version 5. I did upgrade it, but I couldn't make it work with Module Federation and the whole bunch of plugins that were being used and still are. So in my case, it's very unfortunate that I couldn't put it into tests of like the production deployment of a huge retail website. But I was pretty close. You know, if I only had more time and the opportunity of, I don't know, understand Module Federation better at the time, I would have made it, I guess. So, but that's not to discourage you or me of trying to implement this on new projects maybe, and even on legacy projects that have a less bloated Webpack config. So if your project has a tiny or even a medium-sized Webpack config, I would encourage you to, if you have the need of a micro frontend, which is not for everybody, but if you have the need for it, I would encourage you to do it, because I really believe that that's how things are going to be done in the future. And I really believe that it's a pretty good tool. Like, and yeah, so that was my talk, and it was, I don't know if it was frustrating because you were expecting to hear more about micro frontends in general, but yeah, it was a talk about this tool, and I guess it's those things walk hand in hand. And yeah, I hope you learned something, and I don't know if there's questions.
Hello, everyone. I will help you, Philip, with the questions, and Pavel will display them on the screen. And for you to catch a breath, I will read them aloud for you, so you can think of an answer meanwhile. First question is the division of application according to the user needs, in a way allowing for real autonomy of every team and coming closer to the ideal of shared nothing concept, requires profound understanding of the system in terms of business and user experience. Incompetent division of application into vertical systems may make it necessary to reorganize teams or make some teams dependent on others. This leads to returning to all of the problems of monolithic architecture. Do you agree that is the weak of micro frontends?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you used the, I guess, the word incompetent, right? Yeah, I guess incompetent work is the source of all evil. And we are all humans, and we all do incompetent stuff once in a while. So I would say that yes, if you are not able to do I'm trying to think, yeah, governance. If you're not able to divide governance in a smart way, and in a way that each team knows what it owns and only works with that, then your you're a step into the path of going back to an even more complex, integrated and intricate problem of deployments. So I would say yes, the hardest part is the part of defining governance and who's responsible for what. And yeah, I would say that's maybe the biggest problem.
All right, we got another question coming, and it's a basic question. How should the user of a micro-frontend application be authenticated and authorized with the server?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think we just saw that, right? With the little example there. Ideally, you would have a shell, and this shell controls high-level data and pushes it downwards to your micro frontends. So I know that big companies have like, for example, DAZN, which is the sports Netflix of sports. They do micro frontends, and they have this first script that is loaded and that just checks who the user is, where the user is coming from, what's the device, and from there it passes it to the correct micro frontends and gives the data down.
All right, so the third question is, how do you ensure consistency?
Yeah, good question. It's very general, right? Like the concept of consistency. I guess specifically thinking about micro frontends, you could first thing you need to think. I like the idea of thinking about domains, right? There's this concept of domain-driven design, and you have a domain which is let's say Spotify, and Spotify is a platform of music streaming. So but then there's subdomains, which is authentication, things that need to happen for this platform to exist. So authentication, music suggestions, a little player with everything that's going on. So libraries. You have a lot of subdomains, so you need to identify them, and then you need to go to the drawing board and to design good and very strict contracts between your micro frontends. If they are bundled in the same page, they need to have clear contracts. But ideally, what I like to think is that the best way to create your micro frontends is per subdomain. So a page would be a good micro frontend. So you have better consistency between them. So that therefore the shell, and then in the shell each page per root, and then yeah. But you always have to think about consistency once in a while and think if you're doing something wrong and you need to fix it.
And the fourth question we've got is, how do you make teams upgrade their shared package versions, which probably relates to the previous one?
Yeah. How do you make teams upgrade their shared package versions? Sure. Yeah. You need to think about ownership and think that you own your micro frontend, and then you need to version it in a way that reflects progress being made and in the micro frontend itself. Then other micro frontends or the shell application need to see your application as a third party. It's not mine. It's not something that I own, that I know what's happening in there. I don't know. I only know what I implemented. I only know the interface, the contract. So then once a version is upgraded, sorry, once the version is upgraded, I need to, me as the shell, I need to see if I need to upgrade it now. So I will do the CI versioning thing that I shown in the example. So, oh yeah, that's the version that I need now. So I'll upgrade there, and then the version that a specific micro-frontend put out, then it's going to be available for the user. So there needs to be this relationship through contracts and through implementation details. So I know that your micro-frontend changed. Is it breaking change? Is it something that's going to stop working? If it's not, I'll update easily here. If it is, then we need to coordinate a little bit. So.
Fifth question. Wait, given one needs to deploy the shell anyway to bump remote's version, doesn't that defeat the purpose of Module Federation? Not entirely, but for this particular use case.
Yeah, it does. But again, we always think about pros and cons and drawbacks. So we're thinking about a system that needs the version locking. So if your system doesn't need it, if your system can rely on on the maturity and the professionalism of all teams to deploy good stuff, then you don't need the version locking. You just have a shell that reads from whatever it's deployed on each micro frontend and then displays it to the user. So, but how do you know that one day someone will not get fired and be mad and then have everything on his computer and then just deploys something real bad to your website? So then it's pretty good to have like the version locking, and to have it, you have to give some of your freedom away, and I don't think there's any getting around it. So I think that's just drawbacks. But then you can have a team that owns the host, so it's only responsible for changing and bumping versions, and it's less of a responsibility than it would be to be a release manager of everything and bundling everything together, putting on a branch and deploying it to prod. So.
All right, I got a message from Pavel that was the last question. And in that case, thank you very much, Filipe, for the presentation today. Thank you everyone for listening, and see you on 23rd of September for a next dev.js event.
Okay, thank you guys for having me, and it was a great time, and see you there. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.